Alright, if you found this video, I am confident you're going to get an A+ on your HESI exam when it comes to anatomy and physiology because this is part 3 of the HESI exam review. So today we're going to go through 5 different questions. I'm going to do a little mini lesson to explain the answer. And as always, if you'd like to pause after I finish the question, that'd be a great idea so you can get a feel for if you know the answer or not. So let's get started. Number 1, which is not relevant to the pancreas? Glucagon, insulin, digestive enzymes, or aldosterone. Okay, so which is not relevant to the pancreas? I'll write them down quick. Okay, so here are the 4 answers. Well, as we look through, we know that insulin is released by the pancreas to lower blood sugar levels. So these will lower blood glucose levels, okay? And this is actually a hormone, and insulin is a hormone that lowers blood sugar levels. It actually allows glucose into different tissue types. It gets burned up, used up, so therefore your blood glucose levels drop. Glucagon is also a part of the pancreas. It is also a hormone, but it will do the opposite of insulin. So in this case, it's going to increase glucose levels. The way it does that is it's going to basically tell the liver and the muscles to start breaking down glycogen, which glycogen is basically just chains of glucose molecules. And this hormone will tell those cells to start cutting those apart, releasing that glucose into the bloodstream. So that's what glucagon does, and it's also relevant to the pancreas. The pancreas secretes it. Digestive enzymes are also a function, or a structure that's released from the pancreas. A lot of digestive enzymes, things like pancreatic lipases, pancreatic amylases, chymotrypsin, all of those are enzymes that will help break down macromolecules. So they're breaking down macromolecules that you ate, so your carbs, lipids, or proteins, and they will help you absorb them by breaking them down. Just like this process kind of was for glucagon. It breaks down the glucose so that you can use it. So that leaves aldosterone. Aldosterone is actually secreted by the adrenal cortex, which is the adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys. So you've got your kidneys, and then you got the little hats. Those hats are the adrenal glands. And on the outside, which is the cortex, there are going to be different cells that will secrete aldosterone. And aldosterone actually increases sodium reabsorption in the kidneys. Okay, that's usually in response to a decrease in blood volume or blood pressure. Okay, so there you have it. Those 3 are very important to the pancreas. These 2 are hormones. This one's actually an exocrine gland, the digestive enzymes, because it goes into your gut lumen, which is outside of your body. It helps break down those macromolecules for digestion. And then finally, aldosterone is actually from the adrenal cortex. It's secreted in response to low blood volume and blood pressure. Sweet, let's get to the next one. So that was score 1, actually, for, I would say that's a part of either the digestive system or the endocrine system. So I'm going to give 1 to endocrine and 1 to digestive. All right, question number 2. It just says, which hormone induces ovulation? Ooh, here we go. We got reproductive system going on. So first off, ovulation occurs in the ovaries. So the ovaries are the main organ, reproductive organ for females. I'm going to draw kind of the whole reproductive tract. So here you have your ovary up here. You've got your fallopian tubes or your uterine tubes. And then you have your uterus, okay? So when we're talking about ovulation, we're talking about, and you've got 2 ovaries. I should probably draw that out too. Okay, when we're talking about ovulation, it means we're releasing a mature oocyte. Okay, you may have heard of an oocyte before. That literally means egg cell. And it's the egg cell that has undergone all the meiosis divisions, and now it's prepared to get fertilized by a sperm to make an embryo or a zygote, okay? So these will be released, these eggs, during ovulation at the point where the fallopian tube and the ovary connect. But the question is, when does it actually get released? Well, we have to take a cross-section over the ovary in order to understand what's happening. So in the ovary, okay, I'm going to have the fallopian tube out right here. Okay, we've got all these egg cells maturing and kind of dying off, maturing, dying off. But at one point, we're going to have an oocyte that will look like this. And it's going to have some cells around it. and then it's going to have a massive amount of other cells surrounding it too. Okay, at this point in time, it's actually called a Graafian follicle. It just means it's a mature follicle. Basically, there's all these follicular cells around it, and the oocyte is ready to be ovulated, okay? But the issue is we've got some layers here. So we've got this layer of cells here that's preventing the egg from actually ovulating, because ovulation occurs when the egg is released into that area. So the question is, how do we break that area down? Well, at this point, there will be a massive uptick in a hormone called estrogen, okay? So estrogen will spike massively. And that spike in estrogen actually feeds back to the master gland, which we know as the pituitary gland, right? Well, specifically, it's going to go to the anterior pituitary gland, and the anterior pituitary gland is going to begin secreting two hormones. One's going to be the major player. We're going to have follicle-stimulating hormone will spike, but then, here's the kicker, we will also have luteinizing hormone spike. So luteinizing hormone, LH, is going to actually feed back down to here, and that hormone induces basically the shoveling out of this layer of the fallopian tube. It'll break this layer down, and it'll also actually break down some of the layers right here too in that follicle, and therefore that egg, with some cells around it, will be released. So now ovulation has occurred, egg is prepared, and hopefully, if we want to get pregnant, there will be some sperm already there, ready to start burrowing, okay? So the answer is, what hormone-induced ovulation? Luteinizing hormone. However, it was due to the spike of estrogen right before. So estrogen did a positive feedback loop, and then luteinizing hormone increased with it. Luteinizing hormone came down here, broke down that barrier, allowed the egg to ovulate. Awesome. So that's a new one. So we've got to give a score for the reproductive system. Well done. All right, on to the next question. If this video has been helpful for you, please click the subscribe button. Please like the video, comment any questions or comments you have. Tell me this is awesome. Tell me this sucks. I just want to interact with you. So thanks for your support. Let's keep going with the video. All right, now we're on to question number 3, and I wrote it out up here. So which is not a function of the bones? We've got A, calcium storage, B, movement and support of the body, C, meiosis, and D, blood cell production. Think in your head which one you think it is. Let's go through them. So calcium storage, you always know, like when you're growing up, what do they tell you to drink a lot of so that you can have strong bones? Calcium. That's because the bones are primarily made of calcium as well as some phosphorus and other minerals, okay? So it's a great storehouse of calcium. In fact, your blood calcium levels have to stay within a certain range. So if they get too low, we can actually take some of the calcium from the bones, dump it into the blood. Whereas if blood calcium gets too high, we can actually store it in the bones, okay? That's from the either parathyroid hormone or calcitonin is the other hormone. So next one, movement and support. Obviously, as you see me moving about, I am moving bones with my muscles, right? So muscle attachment points to the bones, and we can move and support our body. C, meiosis. Well, if you know what meiosis is, this is actually producing gametes. So gametes are exclusively sex cells, right? And these sex cells are only produced in the testes for men and ovaries for women, okay? So bones do not do meiosis, so therefore that would be the correct answer in this case. It does not, it's not the function of a bone, right? Whereas the last one, blood cell production, it is a function of the bone, specifically in the bone marrow, the red bone marrow, primarily in your flat bones. This is where blood cells will be produced. It's called hematopoiesis. So basically the generation of all blood cells, whether red blood cells, whether platelets, white blood cells, are all made in the bone marrow, which is kind of the hollow opening within the bone itself. Awesome, so that was number 3. So that is a point for the skeletal system. Very good. On to the next one. All right, question number 4. Which part of the nervous system makes you sweat, makes your pupils dilate, and increases your heart rate? Interesting. Okay, so we've got 3 things here. We've got sweating, opening up the pupil and then increasing heart rate. It sounds like we're getting ready to either fight something or run away from something. So that would actually be the branch, the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system deals with preparing your body for what's called fight or flight. You may have also heard fight, flight, or freeze. I usually just talk about these two, where it's preparing your body for action. So think about that. If we have an increased heart rate, okay, now your heart's going to be pumping blood faster throughout the body, through the muscles, so you can move better, right? If our pupils dilate, so now we have very large pupils, well, what do pupils do? They let light in, okay? So if we want to see our surroundings better, to run away from something or see something we need to fight, we need to let in more light, so your pupils will dilate. And then sweating, does it help you? Yes, no, maybe, I guess. You could argue that sweating helps regulate your body temperature. So it helps your body temperature stay within a normal range, which is important to continue to function well. So I could say that sweating would be a response for that, okay? Now, I do want to stress in the previous video in part 2, I can link it here. I believe it'll be right up here. You know that the opposite of the sympathetic would be the parasympathetic. Okay, so the parasympathetic division would basically do the opposite of all these, okay? So instead of increasing your heart rate, parasympathetic would decrease your heart rate. Pupils dilate, instead your parasympathetic would actually constrict your pupils. And likely you wouldn't be sweating if your parasympathetic nervous system was activated. And both of these are underneath the heading of autonomic. Why? Because the autonomic nervous system is automatic. You can't help this process, right? If you see a tiger that's going to kill you, this is going to happen whether you like it or not. You have a stimulus, autonomic response happens. Another division, though, that you need to know is this autonomic is underneath the heading of the motor division of the peripheral nervous system. Okay, there's a lot of subdivisions. But what motor means is it's making some sort of action on your cells. Okay, so think about it. Your heart cells begin depolarizing, getting electrically excited more, so they beat faster, so they beat harder. So this motor division is making some sort of effect on cells. It's an autonomic effect, automatic, and it's going to stimulate you to fight or flight. Okay, so that was question number 4. Which branch of the nervous system? It would be the sympathetic branch. Awesome, so that would be another score for the nervous system. Wonderful. All right, last one coming up. Okay, question number 5. How are spinal and cranial nerves different? How are spinal and cranial nerves different? There could be a lot of answers to this question, so let me walk you through it quick. So first off, we're talking about nerves, right? And nerves are going to be connected to our nervous system. Our central nervous system consists of 2 main structures. We have our brain, and then we have our spinal cord, okay? So the nerves that come off of these things will basically contain these neurons, these signaling cells that can either receive information or they can send information through signaling, okay? These are your signaling cells, okay? So in your spinal cord, these will contain spinal nerves, all right? There's 31 pairs of these. So what this would look like is we'd have all these bundles of the axons. So these are the axons of these neurons. There'd be a bunch of bundles of those wrapped around in what's called a nerve. And that will look like this on both sides. All right? So in that nerve itself, there's just going to be a lot of branches of these neurons sending signals away, or I guess towards the spinal cord or away from it. Okay? So we'll have a bunch of those pairs. We'll have 31, and they're corresponded primarily with like thoracic, lumbar, and then your sacral vertebrae. There's some cranial nerves or cervical nerves as well. So they're basically coming through your spinal cord from your cervical vertebrae all the way down through your sacral vertebrae. All right? 31 pairs of them. Now, the distinguishing factor here. These nerves will contain what's called sensory and motor axons. These will contain both sensory and motor axons. Well, what does that mean? Well, within those nerves, there will be some cells that will actually be out, maybe like on your muscles, okay? So here's like a neuron in your muscle, and say it detects some stretching or some pain in the muscle. Well, it needs to tell the brain about that. How does it do it? Well, it sends it through this nerve, talks to the spinal cord, which will then tell the brain eventually that, hey, you're in pain. This would be a sensory neuron. Why? Because it's sending its information towards the central nervous system, okay? But there will also be neurons in here, in the spinal cord, that will actually go out and talk to maybe muscle cells to make them contract. Okay, so that would be a motor axon because it's making an effect on some sort of body tissue. So we kind of have this interplay of either a sensory or motor, but they're all within the same nerve. So the spinal nerves have both of them. So in this one nerve, just to diagram it out a little better, there might be some sensory neurons here that will send it down the same nerve towards the spinal cord. So all of these nerves have both. It's different with the cranial nerves. So first off, the cranial nerves. What does cranial sound like? Cranium, right? What does that refer to? Your brain. So these are extending from the brain, primarily in the brain stem. Okay, so that's the base of the brain. There's two cranial nerves that aren't in the brain stem. They're going to be a little higher up, but primarily they're from the brain stem. Now, they're going to extend from that brain stem and go out to different structures, maybe more higher up or maybe a little lower, maybe your neck, maybe your eyes, those types of things. And there's 12 cranial nerve pairs. Okay? Now, depending on the cranial nerve, they might be sensory, they might be motor, or they might have both. Okay, so in this case, cranial nerves either are sensory only, motor only, or both. So, let me stop right there. Spinal cord. Okay, spinal nerves, we had 31 pairs. How can we contrast that? Well, the cranial nerves have 12, right? So that's one difference. Difference number two, where they're coming from, right? Spinal nerves are in the spinal cord. Cranial nerves come from the brain, primarily the brainstem. That's difference number two. Last difference. In the cranial nerves, some of them will only be sensory, some of them will only be motor, and some of them will have both. Whereas in the spinal cord, all of them will have both. So long-winded answer. If you'd like to go through the cranial nerves, you can look up like 12 cranial nerves and you can watch it on YouTube. I haven't made a video of it, just check somebody else's out. But those are the differences between the spinal nerves and the cranial nerves. Awesome. So that's another score for the nervous system. So clearly the HESI people like the nervous system. They must like to give you anxiety. Okay, that was question number 5. Well, I guess since it's there, if this video, this. Hey.